Welcome back to All Things Acura. Justin, it's been a while.
It has been a while, man.
We apologize, but again, we try to find topics I think that are going to be beneficial to everyone, and we get in these ruts where there's not much news happening in the Acura world, and here we are.
There always is something happening.
Yeah.
I think whether we think it's news or not is probably debatable.
Yeah, and I know we just had that conversation not that long ago regarding, we don't always know what seems to be in the forefront, right? Because when you're in something, you're in any job that anyone does, like you're the one in it, you're the one that has the knowledge behind it. So you don't know what people want to know necessarily because we feel like, hey, we know it. Other people must know it too. And I think that what that led us into was, we did some research on YouTube to figure out, okay, what's out there? What are people viewing? And we I think, realized that there's just, I'll go down this other rabbit hole for a second, but there's a lot of not great information out there. There's a lot of non-existent information out there. And I think that's kind of where we're getting a little bit hung up, is that we need to provide that.
Yeah, and I think that was our plan from the start of this, is to provide information from the source or a source that deals directly with the Acura brand.
Yeah, because
versus just finding information and then putting it out there and saying this is fact. And we got real sad when we went through YouTube.
We got the big sad
and saw these videos out there that you as consumers are watching, and to no fault of your own, it's just garbage information. It's garbage.
Yeah, and it's nothing against the creators out there. I get it. Like, you're trying to put together stuff, but you, as someone who's in it and knows that information and feels like very strongly about the brand or about the information you provide, it's like, oh man, you just didn't provide it. And I'm like, well, why didn't I do that?
Right. So here we are. We're going to say we're going to provide as much as we can, time allowing, because that's always a hurdle, is we do work every day and we're not creators that can put content information out there. And nobody's paying us to do this. We're just putting information out there so you guys have it.
Yeah.
So where we wanted to start today, though, it's 2024. We're into a new year. We have a whole new set of incentives, and we kind of want to just break them down, go through the incentives on each model, because I think that's a challenge for some people to find all that information. And there are some incentives out there. Lo and behold, we haven't seen much over the last couple of years. If you've been doing any shopping, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so we want to share the information that's out there and kind of put it out there so you guys know what's available.
Yeah, because I think when we looked on Acura's site, this stuff wasn't out there yet, and I don't know when we get up this information, but some of this information is stuff that's like kind of like for our eyes only in some ways, ultimately. But we want to make sure you know what it looks like, because I know we just watched one recently on incentives, and it's like, that's not necessarily correct. Now, I know there's different markets out there, so depending on where you're watching, there could be different things. I believe it doesn't matter what group we're in, but sometimes they do offer in different incentives depending on.
That is going to come up today. It's funny you mentioned
that. I know, I saw that, but
so to Matt's point, with a lot of brands, incentives are based on their market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at a Ford or a Chevy or a Toyota in a certain market, your incentives may be different than a market that's 3 hours away from you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's how some of the brands do it, based on availability, supply, and demand. So that can be different. Acura typically runs national incentives, meaning they're good all the way through across the country. In this case, actually, as we talk about that, there are two different regions on MDX and RDX, and we'll talk about that so you understand. You cannot go to one of those regions to find the deal you want, however. It is based on where you live.
Yeah.
So just know that, and that's the same with any manufacturer. It's based on where you live. Now, if you want to buy a house in one of those other regions to take advantage of those programs, so be it, but it is based on where you live or have residency.
Right. Or else everyone would just start driving the state over potentially and say, hey.
Why wouldn't they go somewhere else where the incentives are better or worse? And that depends on the demand in the market, right?
So ultimately, it's still a level playing field across the country. That's how Acura does things, which is great. It makes everyone's life easier. So whether you call California or call Ohio, you're generally going to get the same kind of deal that's out there. And I think that's like we came across that one YouTube video, and that's the only one I watched when we were in here, was someone saying that the RDX deal wasn't that great. It's all I think, and this kind of goes to why we want to do this one, is because I think everyone has been waiting for that other shoe to drop. Everyone's been waiting. Oh, the incentives are going to get better. Well, they did get a little bit better, but keep in mind, we're still in this weird, genre of what's happening with incentives and manufacturers. So
yeah, all this being said, you can like or not like the incentives. We don't care, but it is relative to what's happening today. You have to look out there and say the Fed raised the rates dramatically last year, right?
Yeah.
And all rates are high. If you go look at mortgages today, they are double what they were just this time last year, right?
Yeah.
So auto rates are no different. They've doubled, if not tripled, over in some cases.
Yeah.
So these are all relative to what's happening out there in the marketplace. If you're waiting to see if they'll go back to where they were in 2019, I'm not going to look in any crystal ball, but I'm going to tell you that probably won't happen in a long time. It is auto business, so I wouldn't say it wouldn't happen ever, but there's probably something else more major that needs to happen down the road, and it's not in the foreseeable, like
next
5,
week
6
or
months,
month.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And right now, I know, like, we're all kind of in this, but we're at the cusp of people who bought or leased their car maybe two years ago, right? And I'm just talking to a client, and you're looking at something, their lease payments are still up $200 to $300, almost $300 a month, and here we are. So it's still a thing that we're coming across where people haven't shopped for a car for a while. That's where we're at. Again, it's gotten better, and that's what we're here to talk about.
And so, to be fair, we'll get to the point. We'll go cover these incentives and go down that rabbit hole. I do want to bring up the fact that car payments, especially if you're looking at leasing end, probably didn't change much for 12 to 15 years. In other words, you could lease a BC car for similar payment for almost a decade and a half.
Yeah.
And now we're really unhappy. Me too. I buy cars too, just like you do and everybody else. That same car is so much more than what it was. And the reality is it was due to change at some point.
Yeah.
The reality of every 3 years coming in the same car for the same amount, with the cost of things going up as much as they have over the last couple of years, is just not a realistic proposition. And people say, well, I didn't think it'd be the same. Well, when you get their expectations on how much it was going to change, well, we're probably, it's not going to be what it was back in 2015 and 16. You might not like what we're saying, and it's just information. It's just, stuff to chew on. That's just the reality of it. It was due to go up at some point. We just happened to go through the event that made it happen.
Yeah, and I think we definitely we may have seen a peak because right now there are more incentives like we're about to talk about. You don't see dealerships selling at MSRP anymore. There's definitely more competition when it comes to that. So it's not if you're in the market, and again, we'll get to these incentives, I promise. But sometimes you think end of the year is like the best time to buy, but I'm telling you, unfortunately, in some cases, they did get better for and here we are into January of 2024. So it's nice to see that. So
let's start off with the Integra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Integra, and I don't actually. Do we have the old sheet?
I did not.
We should have did that. That's okay. Well, I'll just rattle these off a little bit.
I have it handy though, Matt.
Oh, do you have it still? Okay, great. Because I'd like to compare what they were, because sometimes that's beneficial. But I think there still is the loyalty. So there still is the loyalty offer on the Integra, the 750, and they still have the Conquest offer of the 500, which is great. They still have the rates. The money factors did go down. So on the Integra, everything kind of stayed the same from last year. It did get better a little bit on the leasing end. So obviously, and on top of that is the fact that, again, most dealerships are not selling at MSRP anymore. So ultimately, as you kind of followed the Integra into where we're at now, it's probably the best it's been, since it's been out, really. I think was there.
So the rates on the Integra.
Oh, sorry. I guess I should.
The actual rate.
See, this is my problem, right? I'm like, everyone knows what they are, right? It's right here.
So they're offering as a finance rate 3.9 for up to 36 months, 4.9 from 37 to 60 months. So there are special rates. Again, not as low as maybe we saw a couple years ago, but still pretty good rates. I mean, that's 4.9 for up to 5 years is still a pretty good rate, given what's out there in the marketplace. Plus, you can combine that with the loyalty or the conquest offers.
And you still have people that are like, well, that feels high. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe it's still relatively. I'm not sure it depends on what they're comparing to. Like, again, this is actually lower, still very good rates out there.
And then the lease rate, as Matt mentioned, dropped from last month. It actually dropped almost 2. Say it's a money factor. It's not a percent, but if you calculate it to convert it, it dropped almost 2%. So that's a pretty good change from 1 month to the next. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying that the payments are going to drop, to $300 a month on the Integra. It's just not going to slice out that way. However, it is a good lease rate on it.
Right, for sure. For what it was, it did drop, which was great. Moving on to the TLX. So, and again, going back to Integra, Type S is still excluded as far as general incentives.
Yeah, no incentives.
And that's pretty true across the board. We'll get to But, okay, as we go to the TLX, this is one to kind of keep an eye out for. And I say that because we're running slim on the inventory of 23 TLX because they refreshed the 24.
Yeah, so this is the note. To take advantage of 23 incentives on the TLX, you want to do it sooner or later. What's left is what's left. The 24s have shipped. They've started coming. You might say, well, maybe I want to look for a 24. Well, you can. They don't have any of those special rates and loyalty and conquest on a 24. They do have a lease money factor, a lease special, but not as good as a 23.
So going back to the loyalty, so there's $1,000 loyalty and $1,000 conquest, which was that what it was before? Okay, so they carried that over. You still have the 3.9 for up to 36, the 4.9 for up to 60. And again, I guess we should all preface this in saying it's for well-qualified buyers, obviously. And then I think the lease rate, this was a big change, right? So we have the it's 0.00044, which I think is like 1% almost, pretty much.
Yeah, it's about 1%, right? So again, we're back to, well, why aren't there any specials? Why aren't there? That 1%, it doesn't get much lower than that on a lease. I mean, we have seen it come down a little bit less than that. But now you're talking, if there was 0, which they never do on a lease because they have something in there. But if it was 0, you're talking a couple dollars. In other words, this is as good as the 23 is going to get.
Yeah. And as far as I know everyone thinks the end of the year incentives, that end of the year is kind of a misnomer in the auto industry. It's end of the model year is more important than the calendar year. I mean, we still have to get some out, but if you're looking for the best incentives, it's always the end of the model year, and we're at the end of the first part of the generation of this TLX. So as we go to 24, again, they refreshed it. So Acura knows we have a handful left. We got to get rid of those to make room for the 24s. That's why they're so incentivized right now. So that is definitely one to keep an eye out for and get one while you can, because they made some changes to the TLX, which I know we mentioned before. So keep that in mind as well. So you won't have the base model.
So we'll talk about the changes between the 23 and 24 TLX on another show. We don't want to drag this one out that long, but we'll go into that. They're not dramatic. It was a mid-model refresh, so it's still the similar car. But just keep in mind, there's not much inventory left of that. We sold about half of what we had left last month. There's no more coming. What's out there is what's out there. The next one on the list is the TLX Type S. And typically, there's been very little to no incentives on the Type S. But they are offering that same 3.9% for up to 36 or 4.9% for up to 60 months. And they do have a lease money factor on that car, which is probably about 2% in this case.
It did drop.
Here's the kicker. There's only a handful of these left across the country. And I know we have one left, and that's it. There's no more of those in the pipeline, nor is there really any 24 Type S in the pipeline. So here's a little opportunity if you want to get one of those, whether it be on a lease or a purchase, get a little bit of incentive on a car that I think we're going to be a few months out before we start seeing those back in production.
It's a sneaky way to get into that car. Like it's, if you're trying to get some incentives, because
I figured a lease payment on today just for another customer of ours, and you want to talk about payments that are dropping. It's probably $400 to $500 less than it was just 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
That's a big deal. On that car. And you might say, well, it's still not what you can figure one out. I mean, I was pretty surprised, right? So, and again, that low lease. If you're not interested in leasing, take advantage of the special rates, because again, they haven't had that on those.
Yeah, and then on the 24, I think we may have mentioned just a minute ago, the 24 TLX, there's really no incentives on it yet. We just have one here, so they haven't released that. The car's not really out yet, to be fair. But there is a lease rate on it, which is still nice to see that, like, hey, they just didn't forget about it. Like, someone may still want it. So
yeah, so it's an incentive on a lease. What they do is they buy down that rate to make the lease a little more attractive than what it would be on a standard rate. It might not seem like much when you figure a payment on it, because I'm sure that's still a pretty good payment on that 24 TLX. Right. But that rate is about half of what the standard rate. So they use the example of a standard interest rate today was 7.5%, 8%. It's probably 4.5%, 5% versus that. So that's still an incentive on the car versus not having one. So now we get to RDX, which gets a little more complicated because Acura's been advertising 23 RDX for all the way up until now.
Yeah, and I don't know who has one because we haven't had one for a month and a half, almost 2 months now. And I guess we can just go ahead and say it because the other dealers, they may not tell you this, but there's an inventory payoff.
Yeah, so there are no incentives on a 23 anymore, and they do what they call an inventory payout, which is a little bit of money that they throw at the dealer to help get rid of those 23s. Keep in mind, this isn't the car that's going to lease well. The 24 is going to lease way better than a 23.
It says NA.
Don't even ask them. It's a waste of time to even get quotes on that because they can't be competitive with that. When you're talking about rates that are 7-8% versus the rates we're going to talk about as specials on 24, it's not going to be competitive.
Yeah.
And you lose the loyalty or conquest offers if you're eligible for
People are always so confused by that. Right, because if a dealer has those 23, same thing with like maybe the TLX one, and that could come up here soon to where you have that previous model inventory, and people are like, "Well, don't you want to get rid of it?" Yeah, we do, but it's not being backed. So
right, the manufacturer's giving up support. They said you should have sold what you had. If you have one left, sorry, you got to find someone to buy it, and so it's just up to the dealer to discount that whatever. Great if you're looking for a cash transaction or something. They probably can discount that car more than you're going to get a discount on a 24. Is it going to be enough to sway you to the 24? That's your decision.
Yep.
We won't go down that road today. Now, the interesting thing is we mentioned at the start of this, 24 RDX and MDX are regional incentives now.
Yeah.
So meaning one region has a little bit better lease, and one region has a little bit better APR. Not that much different, but it is a little bit different.
Yeah. So starting with the 24 RDX, which we have had plenty of, I'm sure there's plenty out there. I know we were begging Acura by the end of the year to come out with some type of incentive. They just didn't do it. So they are out now. They do have the loyalty offer, which they did have before, which is $1,000, and then the conquest offer of $750 on the 24s. As far as Justin was saying with the regions, so region A, which we're in region A, I believe. So I guess, is there a list of states?
There are a list of states, and instead of trying to rattle through all 50 states, I was going to try to just kind of give you the quick rundown. It looks like it's kind of the northeast is region A. In other words, I can rattle through those. Maybe that's the easy way to do it. Well, I don't know. These are all over the place. There is no separation line here. And again, they're taking the markets and they're saying, okay, this market does well with purchase and this market does well with leasing. You might do both in your market, and you might say that's not fair, but that's just the way it goes. I don't.
It's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah. So the smaller region is region A, and that consists of Arizona, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. See, like we're all over.
Yeah, that's fair.
They usually it's a territory, you could say, like the Midwest, but that's not the case here.
That's true.
And then, so if you didn't hear your state called, you're in region B, which is going to have a little bit better rate, a little bit higher lease.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually didn't even realize that. Yeah, that's interesting. So the finance, well, I don't even know if you want to even say region B is.
So, yeah. Well, we might as well. Region A, RDX, 3.9 up to 36, 4.9 for up to 60 months, similar to the TLX and the Integra. It's probably the easy way to remember it. So it's the same, even on the MDX. Region A is 3.9 for up to 36, 4.9 up to 60 months. Region B gets to take advantage of a little bit lower purchase rate they get 2.49 for up to 36 months or 3.9 for up to 60.
It's where they did 1.5%.
Yeah, that was a
on the one. Probably because most people don't do 36 months and they're just trying to get people to finance or something. But.
So that's on RDX and MDX similar. Now, the lease on Region A is going to be a little less on the RDX. And again, we're comparing no incentive before, and now they have a lease rate that equates to about a 3.5% rate.
Yeah.
So again, went from nothing, or I'd say nothing. There was one, wasn't there?
Go back in time, see?
Yes, there was something.
Yeah, but it was pretty high.
It was pretty high. So yeah. So it
like
dropped.
half.
It's almost half of what it was. So now it's almost a 3.5% rate. Whereas Region B, it's a little bit higher. It's not a lot, actually. That's probably only maybe 1%, if that's higher for Region B. And similar as you talked about the rate. So again, those regions lease probably more cars. So they said, okay, we're going to put the heavier incentive on that and less on the purchase.
Yeah, and again, with the whole 23, 24 RDX, it's just more advantageous to do 24 ultimately.
Especially if you qualify for the loyalty or the conquest. Because keep in mind that Acura Loyalty gives you 1,000 on the RDX or $750 if you're conquest eligible. Moving to the MDX, it carried over the $1,500 Acura Loyalty or the $750 conquest. So let's talk about those eligibility for that. Acura is pretty simple. It's easy to remember with Acura because they always go back 10 years. So if you have whatever the model year, in this case 2024 models, pretty much almost across, well, not except for the TLX.
Hold on, did you see what this says here? As I'm reading this, it says for the 24 RDX, this is live, by the way. So current owners of any 2013.
Wow. I think there's a misprint.
Could have been a typo by Acura there,
but they usually go back 10 years.
Yeah.
And I say usually because we see a typo right there. Or maybe that's what it is.
I don't know.
Go back 10
MDX is
years,
14.
you qualify for that loyalty offer. As long as you have that car in your household, you do not have to be retrading that car. You do not have to get rid of that car. It doesn't even have to be in your name. It literally just needs to be at the same address. You qualify for that loyalty offer.
And it is lease, finance, or cash.
Yes, and you can take advantage of that with any of the programs, whether you're leasing or take advantage of the special rates, or you just want to write a check for the vehicle, you can take advantage of that loyalty offer. Conquest offer works the same way, except it goes back 10 years and there are specified brands that are available. Now, these vary between cars, so I recommend Acura.com there to see, okay, I don't have an Acura, but I might have one of those other cars. Most of them are luxury makes.
Yep.
So you can, Lexus is on almost all the list. Honda is a conquest.
Yeah. That's the only one that's not like a luxury brand.
But you can go through those and see if you have a vehicle in the household that might qualify that. The Honda one's good because a lot of people do have a Honda in the household, or maybe they have a sibling or a son or daughter that has a Honda Civic in the driveway. That qualifies for that conquest offer. So some added incentive there. Get on Acura.com to see if you have one of those cars that qualify. If you do not have an Acura that is a 2014 or newer.
I'm going to stick with the 14 or newer.
I'm going to stick with the 14 or newer. Technically, what we're trying to say there is on the TLX, since it's a 23 model, you can go back to 2013.
Yeah.
10 years back, you can get that. And there's two other incentives that Acura always offers or has offered for a long time that you can also take advantage of.
The military and the graduate offer. Now, the only thing with those, so military is $750, graduate, which is 6 months prior to graduation or 2 years thereafter, is $500, and you do have to finance with Acura Financial Services.
For either one of those incentives, you got to keep in mind you have to either lease or purchase finance with Acura Financial Services to get those incentives. It's the only way that those are eligible to get.
Yeah, don't ask us not, because we can't.
You can stack those on top of the loyalty or conquest. Yep. Now, what you can't do is you can't stack loyalty and conquest, so just keep that in mind. You can have 12 cars at home. Doesn't matter. You don't get one for each.
That'd be nice.
It would.
We have to do that, but...
You know what I always said? Here's my plea to Acura is if you should always get loyalty if you're the original owner of the car.
Yeah. You mean like an Acura?
They haven't bought that
loyalty?
Yet, yeah. Because if you had an Acura that you bought new, 15 years ago, you're pretty loyal. You kept that
100%,
car, right?
Yeah,
You bought it new. You kept
sure.
it for all that time.
Yeah, or like maybe it's someone who like, okay, maybe the caveat is like you had to have had service at an Acura store or something, or like X amount of services. I mean, because people drive their Acuras for a long time, it's not their fault their car didn't break yet. So I don't know.
Right.
I think it should be like original owner.
So don't kill the messenger. But we did want to get the programs out, whether you like them or not. That's up to you. There are some nice improvements here as we go into January.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah, which this is really rare because this is probably the first year we've been doing this too long. Matt's been doing it a while now.
Too long too,
almost
probably
a decade now. And this is the first December to January where things actually have improved.
Yeah.
Because normally December you go out with a bang, and January 1st we're sad because the programs that they had have disappeared, and we're not very happy about
The sad part is I was excited to see the new incentives. That's I think very telling because I was like hopeful that they would add some, or at least not. Sometimes you'll, like you're saying, they drop stuff. They'll take stuff away for the first couple months of the year, which again kind of it lines up.
They did take a couple things away there, but I think they made up for it in other places.
Yeah, for sure.
Inventory looks pretty good across most of the models. There are a couple vehicles out there that are still challenging to get. Keep in mind, 23 TLXs are done. We're not seeing any more of those.
Yep.
If you have your eye on one of those, and that's what you want to do, now's the time.
It's as good as
because once it's gone, it can't be recreated. And it's going to be a while before this type of program's back on the 24. So mark my word there. You might but you got to look at 24 and see if that's what you want to wait for.
Right.
And then there's a couple pockets of things. Advanced MDX never fails. Over the summer, I had more Advanced MDXs than
they're coming out of our eyes.
I mean, in proportions, I think over half of what we had were advanced trim packages. Well, that was Acura dialed back those because there were so many out over the summer, and now they're really hard to come by.
Yeah.
So that's probably not the car you're going to search out and get the best, save the most money on and find the most of. But other than that, most of the other cars have pretty good availability, and there should be some savings to have. Yeah,
for sure. And the other, I'll just throw out the dumb elephant in the room, is the Integra Type S. I don't know when that's a thing.
There's not enough of those.
Just bringing that up.
And I might have said it with TLX Type S. There are none in the system for 24. So if you're waiting to say, well, I'm going to skip on that 23 because there's changes to the 24, well, not only are you giving up that program, but you might, if there's one out there, you might giving up a car for a while.
Yeah, and just so you know, they didn't change the performance. We'll get into change later, but they didn't change the performance, so it's the same car.
So that's I know that takes a while to go through all those because it's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But hopefully that helps let everybody know what's out there. Again, this is straight from the horse's mouth. We're not just pulling this off of some other website from some other party, just because it's something fun to do.
It's legitimate information. Take it for what it is. Take it with a grain of salt. Again, we did this because there was stuff out there. I'm like,
I think the title of this is going to be, if you're looking for clickbait, you won't find it.
That's very. Justin and I both try to be very upfront and honest and truthful, and sometimes it doesn't always fare well in this industry, but ultimately we care a lot about that. I think it just makes sense, and hopefully that was helpful for anyone out there who's looking for one. If you have any questions, obviously you can put in the comments. You can call us here if you'd like.
And if there's things about Acura that you want to know from our perspective, because we've been here for a while, we've seen the brand over the years, cars, features, whatever. Put a comment in. Put it in there.
We read them.
We look for those ideas to get the information that people actually want. And I think that's the whole goal and idea of this podcast and the show, is to get information out that you might not be able to find, or it's difficult for a consumer to find.
Yeah, and I know we have other videos which people comment on. We do read them. I can't respond to every single one of them, but we pan through them and it helps us out. So again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you guys. And if you have any questions, let us know. But thank you so much, and have a great night. Are you leaving too?
They just sent over a correction on that.
Stop. Did you just get that live?
I just got the email as we were doing this. Yeah. All right. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Wow.